Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. Electrifying!
Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon podcast and the main podcast on a Monday. I hope you're doing very, very well. We're here, we're back. We tried to record a podcast yesterday. We had some technical difficulties, let's say. It was going to be a podcast with Rohan and myself, but unfortunately for Rohan, he can't be here for this one. But luckily for us, we have the sun-kissed, I'll put it politely, George with us.
I was going to say, you've got my cousin. You know, this is my cousin who has stayed in the tanning bed for far too long. I had a good weekend. I went away for once, and one of those that you fall asleep on the beach, and I'm sure any British man can relate on the beach.
We can.
This is something that, you know what? Beauty's pain. It'll turn into a tan. I'll be feeling fresh like a new coat, and we'll be rocking it.
I would have guessed you'd be a guy who sort of never burns. You'd be a guy who sort of bronzes.
First one
with the Greek heritage.
First one, burn like this. I'm telling you, in a couple days when we record maybe the Scouted, she'll turn into a tan and it'll be bronzy. But first one, you got to burn. Okay. Burn it out. Then tan it out.
Yeah, I was saying just before we recorded, for people who know this reference, Brit abroad is the kind of, if you're not watching us, you're just listening. That is probably the reference there. And I'm in my gym gear because I go to the gym, guys. Just to address that as well. Because I go to the gym just one more time. I go to the gym. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. We're very excited to have you here and to chat football as always and Arsenal. A couple of little housekeeping bits. Over the weekend, ended last week, we put out a new tier on Patreon and YouTube membership. So just to discuss that, we're super excited about where the pod's going, and we sort of discussed to YouTube members and patrons and stuff, and wanted to thank those, but also to all of you guys who listen on YouTube and Spotify and stuff. Thank you so much for your support. It's amazing. Like we obviously the transfer window and various things are helping, but the fact that Arsenal, especially in a, let's face it, a difficult period, and we're still having the sort of the support on the pod that we do, and the comments and the feedback and the engagement and stuff. It's amazing. If you want to support as a Patreon YouTube member, we're sort of taking the pod a little bit further. We're trying to get some technical upgrades, trying to avoid some issues like the ones we had yesterday, and various sorts of things to sort of take the pod to the next place, get every show, whether it's the main pod or the data pod, or George has got a new show coming out. We're trying to sort of take the pod to the next space, and one of the ways we need to do that is obviously financially. So if you are able to, if you want to, we have a new tier available on Patreon. The first tier is always going to be there. It's the same stuff you always get. So it's the data pods and the scouteds and the rewatches, access to the Discord server. But if you want to become a director of the Cannon podcast, you get access to loads of new stuff. So you get access to a monthly Q&A, also like phone in, where we get to sort of get you guys on camera and on the mic and stuff if you want to be, and get to know you guys sort of more intimately. I was going to say, a little bit weird. You know what I mean? We've got a new series coming, which George is going to talk to you about in just a second. We've got your name at the end of the show. We've got sort of voting rights and various other things. But basically, if you want to get more involved in the Cannon podcast, you absolutely can. We've already had loads of sign-ups to that tier, and all those things will be rolling out in the next few weeks. So thank you for doing that. But yeah, just to say, regardless whether you sign up to Patreon, whether you sign up to Director, whether you don't at all, whether you hate us, whatever, thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. And it's just it's just an honour to be here chatting. But yeah, George, thoughts, and also talk to us about the new initiative.
Yeah, mate, like I wanted to echo the support. It is crazy to me that a guy from Canada is able to reach people across the world, and I'm truly humbled every time. And the support in the last 2 months has been crazy from our perspective, and we just want to keep growing, keep learning, keep ensuring that the community grows day by day. And I mean, some of that means that we want to reinvest back into you. And if you guys do so, please, like, you could check out the different tiers. The one thing I do want to say and reiterate, it was important for me and Alex to ensure that everybody felt like whatever membership they were on, nothing's changing. So I want to reiterate that if you're on a particular tier, nothing's changing in terms of your access, in terms of the type of content that you receive, all of the exact same things, where whatever was free is free. Whatever you received, you will still receive and will continue to receive. There is just another tier if you'd like to get us to kind of know us a little bit more on a personal level, in which we'll try to connect, we'll try to get in touch with you. And of course, this new show that we're talking about, the Tactics Corner, that I'd like to bring, is going to be a little bit more of an educational tool. It's going to be a little bit flexible, where I'm going to try to teach maybe some coaching tactics, some ways to structure, as well as really go into a little bit more of a nerdy deep dive about how coaches might look at A players to give you guys the kind of skills that you can become me and my job will be lost. No, it'll be more of a sense that if you'd like to have a little bit more of an educational one-on-one, your first time novice coach will maybe go through some tactical theory, some stuff like that. It'll be a little bit more catered to you guys, the directors, what you would like me to get into. But we're hoping that it'll be a little bit more of a tactical deep dive into the game itself, which may not be for everybody, but it'll be something for you guys to decide how you want to take it and where you want to go.
Absolutely, yeah, well said, and yeah. It's a really exciting time. But whatever level of support you choose to give us, we really appreciate it. So thank you guys so much. Let's get on to the Arsenal. Enough housekeeping, enough dilly-dallying. And George, we're dilly-dallying in the market. It's the 16th of June. And it's over, isn't it? I'm, of course, joking. Let me sort of tee you up with a couple of things. I think, obviously, there are some, it's always social media attacks. You can look around and see some panicking, of course, a little bit in terms of the inactivity. How much of this do you put down to, where Arsenal are at and this desire to sort of, start this window off with a bang? Obviously, right now, we can't make any signings because of the Club World Cup, but that will change in a few weeks, I think it is, or I think it actually might be today we can change. It's only 6 days or something. Certainly the transfer window reopen soon. The desire for Arsenal to sort of get going quickly, the desire, or I suppose the optics of the likes of Liverpool and Manchester City and so on making such big moves, and Real Madrid as well, even sort of our, I would say, European rivals now, considering we beat them. Where are you at right now in terms of this sort of inactivity? Are you panicking? Are you feeling all right? Knowing you, I suspect you'll be all right.
I'm sleeping on the beach, mate. Quite literally. I do feel that we need to have some context as a fan base, though. I mean, we factually have secured 2 signings, and I think that's going under the radar. I mean, just because that they've been delayed and they're not holding the shirt, and it's been something that I feel people are ignoring. But because mostly I feel like it's been fatigue, and the whole Kepa to Juan Garcia kind of debate in general is because I think people are holding back their want to praise the deal because it has a little bit more of context about what we do overall, right? So it's objectively a very good deal, but it becomes an excellent deal if the money is used to reinvest into forwards. So there's a little bit of hold back there. And then, of course, Zubimendi is something that we've known about for the better part of 6 months. So there, for me, is a lot of link fatigue there. There's nothing new that has come in the last, I'd say, month. And of course, when you have Liverpool...
Got some new training gear today.
We do excellent there, always.
And we do it well.
Yeah, we do. But I do think that, I suspect that has a lot to do with it. And for a lot of people, they're looking across at different clubs and looking at our title rivals. And I mean, you've got Liverpool, who, yes, they have done Frimpong, they have done Florian Wirtz, but ironically, mate, like they also aren't holding up the shirt. They've been announced as well, except for Frimpong, who has been announced. But I mean, their big signing in Florian Wirtz, Gyökeres is majorly linked, not holding up the shirt. If we're going to apply the same logic, we're doing the same with Sesko and Gyokeres. Like, if you want to apply that, but I think one thing I do want to sympathize, though, is there is this urgency, mate, because of what happened last year. And it's like we've talked about it on the pod, and we've made it a saying. So I can't ignore that those feelings and that anger isn't behind a lot of the context as to why people are saying, "What are we doing?" Because to go an entire year without recruiting a forward in 2024 was illogical, but we did it. So you can't not ignore the crowd that are saying, "What happened before? What happened last year?" You were saying, like, the logical thing. We did the opposite. Yep. So there's no guarantee when literally the last chance you had, you were illogical. I get that. That I'm with you on. I'm just more of a mentality of have the pitchforks when the dinner comes to the table and it's burnt. I'm not going to be at the restaurant and say, shit, the steak that I ordered is going to be crap. I'm going to wait to see whether or not the steak is crap, and then I'm going to send it back or not. And, that's kind of just, that's kind of where I'm at with the whole aspect of it. I do think it's worth talking about maybe some of the changes the club is doing and how we've approached the window, but we can talk about that a little bit later. But as far as just that frustration, that initial frustration about where are the new novel signing that I would like to see, And maybe why, even if we've seen links and fairly consistent links, I mean, Rodrigo isn't a small link, as well. And Nico Williams has been consistently linked despite this movement, quote unquote. Why is there this feeling that Arsenal have done nothing? I can't ignore it's because the previous year we did do nothing. And it was against every logical strain and every single benefit of the doubt scenario that you would have given, but they did it anyways. So I sympathize with that pressure in the background, but I do think, let's just hold off a bit, guys. I do think things are a little bit different.
Yeah, it's tough. I think you make a really good point around we're sort of, even the stuff we are doing, it becomes better and worse, basically, depending on what else happens. And that is it's a really good point. And I think it's maybe the best analysis I've heard of the situation, because it's like, we are doing stuff is happening. It just depends. And it's a lot of theory. I think also, specifically with having a new executive team heading into this window and how we're sort of looking at it, we all want kind of immediate change. We all want that. We're expecting a kind of a from day one, a sort of, wow, this is a new Arsenal. But actually, unfortunately, what matters is what we end up with on the 3rd of September, whatever it is. However we get there, we'd love to get it done sooner. But if it's the wrong player for the sake of 2-3 games, it really, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter over a 5-year contract, does it? So we want that. But yeah, it's kind of a lot of holding off on judgment for the moment. I think, let's come on to specific situations. The Sesko Gyökeres thing, there was some news obviously over the weekend that Gyökeres, from Fabrizio Romano, Gyökeres' first choice is Arsenal, which I found interesting, the response, seemingly from the sort of the Arsenal sphere, certainly the Arsenal sort of online media sphere anyway, was, oh, wow, okay, well, this is, almost this is happening. And I went, hang on a minute. This is what the news is, that Gyökeres' first choice is Arsenal. That doesn't mean Arsenal want Gyökeres, and that would have been my suspicion from the start. If you're given a choice as a player between Manchester United and Arsenal right now, I hope anyone in their right mind would choose Arsenal. It didn't feel like a particularly big news story to me, but obviously I understand why it created the splash that it did. What's your take on this situation? I have a bit of a theory and a point to make before that. One is, I really push back on this thing of Arsenal are, and I think this is, I understand sometimes in the reporting you have to sort of phrase it this way to not come across a certain way. Arsenal are choosing between Sesko and Gyökeres. And I think a lot of maybe some of this unrest comes from the idea that Andrea Berta and Mikel Arteta are sat in a room somewhere going, oh, but look at this clip. Oh, but look at this clip of, yeah, but guys, they have made their choice. I guarantee you, in probably about March or April, the list was set. Oh, yeah. I think what's happening, in my opinion, what's happening is we're waiting for another deal, and my suspicion would be Rodrigo. That is my guess, to work out what the terms of the Rodrigo deal are, to work out what the financials of the Rodrigo deal are, what that would mean for certain other players. To sign a player of that magnitude, of, let's say Rodrigo ends up being, I don't know, let's say £90 million. That's a big outlay. That has a big impact on Martinelli. That has a big impact on the what we're going to do on the left-hand side, which we've spoken about before, right, on the podcast. That is going to impact what we can do at centre forward. And I wouldn't like to say that means Sesko or that means Gyökeres. I don't know, but it will mean we'll have to change certain things. We might have to put less money up front for Sesko, for example, whatever. So that's sort of my theory is really we're waiting for another deal. It might not be Rodrigo. But I really push back on this thing that they're being indecisive about the players. It's just not how it works, in my view. Or I don't think that's how it works. But I'm curious on your take.
Yeah, there's two aspects, and I think you're brilliant to bring this up, because first off, I am spreading what I think are transfer secrets that no one wants, in the sense of, I want you guys to engage, because for us it's great. We make content. If it is as reporting 30 seconds in which there's a flash in the pan, that'd be great, but I hate to break the news. I mean, that's just not how corporations work. You don't make £90 million deals on the back of 1 week of feeling, and you don't make major moves. For God's sakes, I am not making a major move as a new bound-to-be husband to move into a freaking home for $1 million, let alone a $90 million investment. And it's the same theory for these big clubs, by the way. They're not just willy-nilly engaging in multi-million pound deals. This is stuff that has been ironed out far more before. The one thing I do say is you are always open to opportunities. Just in the same way that if I'm looking for a house and something crops up on the market, I'm not just going to ignore and not do research on a great opportunity just because I've done a lot of really good research on other properties. And, I think this whole aspect about, changing funds, again, the analogy to me is wedding planning. And I really intimately understand this on personal level. I mean, I go into my wedding with a certain amount I want to spend. Now, doesn't mean I'm not talking to a photographer and I'm not talking to the florist and I'm not talking to the venue. I'm talking to all three and I'm balancing all three. But if the venue turns out and said, hey, George, your midnight snack is an extra $20 per person, I'm going to say, hold on, I'm a Greek man inviting 500 people to my wedding. $20 ain't just $20. That's $20 times 500. That's a little bit different. And then if the florist starts saying, okay, every bouquet at your table is an extra 30, 40, $50, I'm starting to say, my videographer, can he get all that money? I don't know. Do I need a videographer? Should we elope? You start asking all of those questions because it's a knock-on effect, and it's much in the same way that a budget will work, really, right, guys? So from my perspective on both angles, first off, there's absolutely no war, no power vacuum that is happening right now. Arsenal did an entire 6-month process that actually took longer than people remember, I think, because Edu had left back in November, right, mate? Like, the fact that we hadn't confirmed a sporting director was conversations that we were having on the podcast quite a bit, where we really need to start seeing movement by March. It was a very methodical process. I refuse to believe after 3, 4, 5 months of interviewing prime candidates, you are not unified in a vision. Anybody who has worked in a new job, I'm sorry, regardless of your feelings on it, knows this. You guys are aligned on vision. Now, you may want to make a splash as a new director, as a new person, in terms of saying, okay, thank you for hiring me. Look at what I did. That is separate. But as far as vision, unification, on philosophy, ideas, you will bet your bottom dollar they are completely aligned about who they're doing. The way they're going to acquire these targets is going to be based on whether or not they need to pay the florist the extra 50 or they want to save that for the DJ. And depending on if you're a dancer to ABBA or not, you're going to make that call.
Vintage George V analogy here. I think it's totally right. And I think also going back to those November conversations, we don't know. What we do know for sure is that I can't say anything for 100% certain because I wasn't there, which is my usual caveat. But with this one, I think you can. 99.9%. The first conversation with Andrea Berto was not in March, was it? Like, they would have been talking for a while. And one of the very first, if you're going into a conversation with a sporting director of Arsenal in, let's say, December, you're saying, okay, what we're doing. How do we solve our number 9 issue isn't one of the first things you're discussing. I don't know what you're discussing. What are you talking about? Yeah, I don't. So what are you talking about? Who's going to do the bins in the office? What are you discussing? This will have been a long time coming, and I think that's why I feel. I suppose it's just to bring it back. This is how I feel. Why I feel fairly sanguine. I think about sort of what's going on at the minute, and I suspect what I think is happening is we're waiting for the Rodrigo deal. I'd be interested to hear if you think more specifically that's what we're waiting for. If you think there might be something else. If we're going, okay, I'm going real speculative here. There's a bit of a theory, and I've seen it, that Madrid aren't really using Rodrigo in many promotional things. There's a lot of people talking about the Club World Cup and potentially he's not going to be involved massively. What do you make of this sort of Rodrigo, Sesko, Gyökeres? Who are we waiting for? Like, how do you sort of triangulate all that specifically on the players? What do you think is happening?
So, mate, I think people are forgetting Nico Williams is no cheap deal. It equally the plan B, if you want to call it that, and I actually don't believe it's plan B quite yet, to be honest. I think that Arsenal know who they want to go after, but it's in the context of not just the forwards. It's about what else they can do. And that's part of it, mate. Like, again, hate to bring it back to that wedding analogy, but spending on wedding invites also impacts whether or not you can get a florist, which is a major thing. Now, is stationery your biggest thing in your wedding? The wedding invite is at the biggest expense in your wedding. No, it isn't. But it's part of the budget that if it goes over, you're going to have to take from something else, and may have to take from something else that is more major. And I look at the Nico Williams deal, and I think people are forgetting that's freaking 50 million pounds up front with a 200, 250 wage. That's not cheap. And that is equivalent to a $90 million deal that's amortized on 250. They're both going to have similar wage demands. One is 90 million amortized, another one's 50 up front. Those are both major, major deals. The one thing I do think is relevant to talk about personally is the approach of Andrea Berta, because we haven't been used to this as Arsenal fans, where for me, it's less about the individual players that we're after, but the approach of a sporting director who is, I'm sorry, really experienced and is balancing multiple deals at once, where it felt like for the longest time, and I'm not saying one is good or bad, but Edu very much seemed singular in his pursuits. It was very rare we had co-sagas, let's call it that way. Immediately, I don't care what you're talking about, the winger, the striker, everything has been a co-saga. And we've got a sporting director that is getting the deals to the point of completion. And it's just Arsenal saying yes or no. And the level of activity, mate, is, I think, something that we do need to talk about, because it is a little bit different. Now, whether Edu had different financial constraints, regardless of the context or why, I do think that the approach is a little bit different. And it's what's leading to a little bit of doubt, frustration, because both scenarios equal confusion, right? Even though Edu may have been singular in his pursuits, he never talked to the media. So this idea of a plan was left for us to fill in. Berta is so active. He's such a chatty Cathy. He's talking to everyone and their mother. And you're saying, okay, well, how much of that is true? Like, I don't know. So they're both achieving this sense of mystery about the exact identity of the plan, but they're doing it in completely different ways. And so you're left with the same confusion, but you're left with a very different approach. I don't know whose is better necessarily. I do lean on, and I will say my piece because I won't sit on the fence. I love the Berta approach. It makes me feel safe in the sense of, if that's not done, this is done. It makes me feel proactive. It's not a sense of I must do one thing. Far too often there was this case previously, I felt that a target was one or bust. And it may have come that people started saying, is that coming from Mikel? Is that coming from Edu? It came from Arsenal. Arsenal at times, too many times, it seemed like one or bust. I love that right now we are open to multiple solutions. Rodrigo, Nico Williams, we've talked to Leao. Like, I love the proactivity that we've talked to every major left wing on the market. We're getting deals progressing. We're negotiating. Regardless of if I prefer Sesko, by the way, over Gyökeres, I love that Gyökeres has been brought to a point that the deal is there. I do love that, and I can't deny that. And I think that's brilliant, proactive business. That's what I think should be praised a lot more than the individual target debate, because they're going to show you what that's going to be. But to get the deals done to the point that we've gotten to, by the way, with two major forward acquirements, and in the midst of a Club World Cup, which I'm sorry, guys, the window's closed. Even if we wanted to, we couldn't register these players. So like this idea that we were going to finish our entire window in the first 10 days, craziness. But let's kind of maybe understand the difference in approach from Arsenal and understand that Berta, he is going to make a splash, but his splash for me has always been not in targets this year, in approach. And I think that we will see and look back on this window as having seen that it's been moved differently. I don't know whether or not the targets will reflect Berta targets right now. It's too early for me, and conversations have gone on for far too long about the philosophy of Arsenal to really change that kind of player war. But I think that's probably a bigger discussion point.
And will require a bigger sample, I think, to have a real discussion. But I think the approach thing, again, always with the caveat that we're working off reports, but you can triangulate stuff. I think both approaches basically have their cons, because from an Edu perspective, it looks really good if you go, he's our guy and we went and got our guy. But then you end up with situations like Neto, where clearly Joan Garcia was the guy last summer. Yeah. And then you end up with a cup-tied goalkeeper on deadline day. So, you know, you have that downside. The downside with the Berta thing is probably, you maybe look a little bit indecisive potentially. Who cares particularly? But realistically, I look at Sesko and Gyökeres and I think, wow, those are different players to me. Very, very different players. So maybe that's the thing. I think Arsenal will have their preference, obviously, as we discussed earlier, but maybe it looks a little bit indecisive or could be indecisive potentially. I think maybe a situation I wanted to come to and discuss here as well is Viktor Osimhen, which is a name that we don't really put into this debate, particularly, which I know for you certainly, but for me is a mystery to me. So latest from Fabrizio Romano is Al Hilal not giving up on Viktor Osimhen, so they want to submit new proposal to the player. Osimhen rejected 10 days ago, but Al Hilal insists, raced open as Galatasaray and Premier League clubs are still there. And I'm telling you, I'm looking at the Premier League table. Surely one of those is us. Like, I can't imagine Viktor Osimhen on the wages that he's on, having won the things he's won, with the profile he's on, with I think the way he's perceived in football. He's not looking at Bournemouth and Brentford and Fulham, is he? So, we're talking the top clubs, and I don't know exactly who, but that's who I would be looking at. What do you make of this situation? Look, again, as with the situation we discussed last week, I think it was with Theo Hernandez and stuff. I don't want to go too far into what's going on off screen. Let's say I will say maybe just to do a little bit of that. There's a journalist who's very close to him, a Nigerian journalist. I forget the guy's name, but he was posting stuff about like he's got pictures of him with Osimhen on his pages and stuff, and he's posting stuff about betting odds for Osimhen's next club, and you just sort of think, I don't know. I don't want to go too far down that. But that's something I actually saw and can verify. What do you think that is? Because I look at a player like that and I watch him. I think the reference game I have is that Liverpool game where he's up against Gomez and Van Dijk. He's running rings around them, and in terms of that immediate impact, win now, come in, centre forward. Maybe it's wages, but the fact that he's rejecting Saudi tells me there's more to this story.
I unfortunately feel that I can't be strong in my analysis until I have the outcome, because I do think that off the pitch is the entirety of this conversation. I don't think, you know me so long. How long have I been pushing the Osimhen train? Like, if we're talking from a talent perspective on the pitch, if that's all that we're talking about, this is a no-brainer as far as Arsenal recruit a damn forward in 2024. But if Osimhen goes to Saudi, they just pulled an Arsenal 2024. They didn't recruit a forward in the entirety of it. Like, I can't make that as like, oh, that's likely, or this is the reason why we're going to do that, because it's illogical. It's completely illogical. And I do believe that it has to do with things that I can't verify, and I'm uncomfortable talking about those things. I think, like, mate, we're not the only club that could use a number 9. You don't believe Chelsea, Manchester United are going to be there? You don't think even Liverpool? You imagine Osimhen there in Liverpool with Florian Wirtz and everything.
Osimhen and Wirtz.
Jesus Christ. God, yeah. I think every major club in the world would look at that. You don't think PSG would look at Osimhen and think, that's a really brilliant way to go and tie up that front line? You don't think Madrid, in terms of trying to understand the Mbappe, the Vinny Jr., would he have a look? Like, Bayern with Kane, like, they're all going to have a look at this guy. But if they all decide, I don't want it, something's wrong. And I don't want to be rude. I mean, like, if you've got, if you're desired in that way by a talent perspective, okay, and you don't go to any of the big clubs, then for me, you can't blame your own club. That's just where I'm at. If none of the big clubs go, and this is outcome analysis a little bit, but unfortunately it's because I can't be in the room. You know what I mean? So I'll judge blame to the Osimhen thing, and I'll refuse to talk about him until I know the outcome, because respectfully, if he goes to Saudi, just like I said last week, power to him. Bless him and his family for going to secure their future and securing generational wealth. I don't think big clubs are after that, but you're well within your right to do it. And you're well within your right to secure the future of your family for generations. And that should not be underplayed. Okay? I have no ill will on Osimhen or any player that's wanting to do that. However, I don't think big clubs are looking at that as investments where, they're going to pay you well to a point, but it's not the definition of your career. For some players, it has become the definition of their career. And this is a profession. It's make the most of what you can while you can in a very short career. And God bless you for that. You've got the talent to do that. I don't know if I'm going to be as confident in doing those things, mate. Like mate, like I don't think people realize some of the offers he turned down. What was it? Was it like 50 million euros a year? Something stupid like that. Like, come on, mate. Like, we're not talking about an extra couple $100 a week here. Like, I have to be real. It's going to be a thought process. And for as much as us fans, we want to see the best players in the best teams because we love the story, right? We love the story about you reaching a certain level in the game through legacy and defining your career through legacy. And I hate to, and I don't mean this rudely, I truly don't. Some players want to define their career with what they earned. How, in the 10 years that they had playing, what can they walk out with their family? And is their kids' generationally secured? Have I been able as a man, have I as a man been able to change the course of my entire family tree with freaking 50 million a year? You bet your damn ass I can. How many people in their life and men in their life, by the way, can sit there and say, my legacy isn't career, it's my family's legacy. And I want to really emphasize that point because it's not less than your career. I'm sorry. For me personally, that is huge. You want to do that? That is up to you. And God bless you for being able to do that. From my perspective, I just don't think big clubs are going to be like, okay, I want that, and I'm going to sacrifice everything to give a player that if that's how he wants to define his playing days. And so I do think that Osimhen and the likes of Osimhen, because he's not going to be the only one, those types of players, you need outcome analysis to kind of maybe determine that if no big club in the world is going to get you, then there was a problem. Now, even if one big club gets them, mate, I think equally you question Arsenal. If one big club, one of the big clubs, we're talking the Barca, the Madrid, the Bayern, the Chelsea, United, Arsenal, the traditional big players, the quarterfinal, semifinalists of Europe that you always suspect, if he goes to any one of those, you ask your questions because they did it. They did it when you felt like you couldn't, so why couldn't you? If none of them do it, I don't know, maybe he has stinky armpits. I don't know. Like there's a little bit, there's got to be a reason, right?
There's got to be, and I think that defining your career by is a good way of kind of discussing this. And as you say, like I also think, we're discussing it, and I don't know where people listen to this podcast from. We look at our analytics, and a lot of it's from the UK and the US and stuff. But I know we have people from different parts of the world, and there's different values and different desires and dreams coming from all different corners of the globe. And I think a lot of the time we look at it from certainly I look at it from a Premier League and a Western lens and go, well, he should be doing this, and it's like, well, should he? Like, he should do what he wants. It's his life. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And yeah, the one thing I would say is I look at his career and I look at someone who's come from Nigeria, went to Wolfsburg, went out on loan, did well on loan, then went to Lille, then went to Napoli. It feels like he's done the hard yards to get himself into a position in Europe where you sort of go, okay, well, maybe you can come to the Bayerns or the Real Madrids or the whatever, and he's always had those links. I just ultimately there's things we do you know what I mean? It doesn't feel like a sort of the first chance, John Duran, the first chance he gets, right, go, and that's fair enough. It's his choice. It doesn't feel like that with Osimhen. So yeah, I don't quite know. It's a bizarre one, and ultimately, as you say, it can only be defined by his outcome. But just speaking on the talent, because you made a good point. If he does go to a United or a Chelsea or whatever, like in terms of what we need, when we talk about like what Sesko will be, I think there's aspects of his game that Sesko can maybe surpass. But right now, coming in today to win now, like wow, that would be there. So I want to put the name there. I want to maybe leave that discussion there, aware of how much we can't talk about or don't know about certainly, but I don't want to forget his name. Because it just feels so odd to me, and as you say, if he does end up going to another European club, I will ask big questions. Let's change gears slightly. News came out from Fabrizio Romano yesterday that Miles Skelly is close to signing his new contract. We've heard for a while from various places, Hand of Arsenal, etc., but I don't think it's been confirmed by one of the big two, the On Bomb or Mr. Fabrizio. We have spoken about I'm not sure we have actually on the podcast. There was some rumours of a Real Madrid interest, which I think got confirmed yesterday as well. I just want to go there, man, and maybe just do a bit of self-congratulations for work we didn't do.
As usual,
just
podcasters
Oh, mate, yeah. It's all us. It's all reflected glory. Actually, to be fair, you've been propping him for years, so maybe you could take a little bit of that.
No.
Yeah, look, the Real Madrid interest, like, at that age, like, that is only reserved for the best of the best of the best of the best.
Yeah,
like, and that is, this is your Hendrix, this is your Estevials, this is your, like, that's the class that Miles is held in, or the esteem that Miles is held in at 18 years of age. I'll give you some space to wax lyrical about your son. But really wanting to come to this, looking ahead to next season with Miles, I'm really excited about this new contract. I think he deserves, I was talking about this with Rohan on TCP Live, like, I think he deserves in the hundreds of thousands, like realistically. If I'm asking you to be a starting player in a team that is in the Premier League and Champions League, trying to win those competitions on a hopefully 5-6 year deal, I don't know why we're not talking about serious money for this guy, and especially as coming through our academy. Having not paid a transfer fee for him, I don't know why we're not talking about serious money for him, and I just don't think we should be ashamed of that, because other clubs will pay him that, and he's earned that. But secondly, this usage, there is some. Obviously, we talk a lot about Rodrigo and what we're going to do with this left hand side. That is Miles's slot, so we have to be careful there. I'm not necessarily interested right now in what you would do. I'm curious what you think the club will do with Miles, because I have a bit of a theory about that, but I want to wait until you hear what you say. But yeah, thoughts on the sort of the Real Madrid interest, but more sort of heading towards that, what you think the club will do with Miles next season, positionally.
So I think that Miles has got himself and worked himself to a point in which he's one of the first names on the team sheet. That should not be something that it gets ignored from a person of his level at 18, from his personal journey, from his idea about having his international and freaking club career debut as soon as last season.
This is why we're talking about the contracts. Like, we're gonna be serious here.
Like, it's insane. The rise is crazy. Now, again, I'm going to congratulate myself because it's all because of me. And his success is all because of me, of course. But look, this is a talent.
I spoke to his mum once. I think it was me.
But mate, it's one thing to have the talent, and it's one thing to actually do it as well. And I just don't think that gets said enough. I mean, this guy for me was clearly Young Player of the Season by a margin. That is the definition for why that award exists. And I think when you're talking about the type of contract...
Who won in the end?
I don't even know. I clocked out. Once I saw that he wasn't, seriously there, I clocked out. That's it.
It was Gravenberch.
Yeah.
That's crazy to me, by the way.
It's wild.
I
don't want to get into it. By the way, but
can I just say, both Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher wanted Miles to win, which I thought was hilarious.
My best friends. We agree.
Your best mates.
Yeah,
you love them.
Yeah, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
He's 20. Gravenberch is 23, guys.
Mate, it's just so annoying. I have a whole thing. Like, we need to really reestablish about what we mean by young players. Anyways, I'm with you. It has to be in the hundreds, because to me, I would like us to start defining wage by impact with the team, and first name on the team sheet is warranting some of those things, right? And there's going to be situations in which you were at the time first name on the team sheet, but if with time it evolves and the next contract, your position in the team changes, you renegotiate for me lower or higher. Maybe you could become even more important. But that's the definition of what contractually I should do. And I think sub 100K is reserved for people that are ultimately in cameos and haven't established themselves. And by the way, this is why I put Ethan's next contract not as high as Miles. I don't think they should get parity, because I don't believe that they've had parity of impact. As much as I love him and the talent, like, We're not talking talent here. We're not talking who I prefer and who I believe is going to reach different levels in the game, but we're talking about impact on the team. And factually, Miles has had, so far to date, more impact. And therefore, if he's more in line with the contract, I don't know, I'm looking at 120 in terms of what I'd expect from him. Certainly he's going to Madrid and getting offered crazier, probably more if he is at those points. But that's what I'm looking at. And then to not get away from your question about positional requirements or not. I will say this respectfully. People that have watched Miles and his career know what he can do. And we saw spurts of it in even the small cameos that we saw last season about his impact in higher areas. You're looking at your Man Cities, the runs he makes from his own box, carrying it to the final third and laying it off in the final third with the composure to do so to set up Martinelli for a shot on goal. You don't get players that run box to box, mate, very often. You do not. And he's doing brilliantly in the role that he's had. I mean, he's walked in and been the best dueling left back, in the league. It's crazy. But to me, to cap that talent onto a particular position, when we always define successful players by their versatility, is insane to me. It's insane to me. It's asinine. And, he's talked about it. He's talked about it flat out at the end of the season. Look, I thought I had the talent to go into midfield, but wherever the coach wants to play me, I'll play for whatever the coach does. But that doesn't mean I don't believe I can't play in midfield in this team, which is what he said, and rightfully so. That boy, the talent level, you don't limit him in terms of what he could be and what he could do. I factually believe that we're going to see some more midfield cameos. I factually believe that the reason that we may not go for extra legs in midfield is because not to get into that topic, but we're going to renew, an Partey, and we're going to potentially look at Miles as a midfield option. Between those two, that's the justification for potentially not going in for a midfielder with legs. And I'm ready to go on that train. I'm ready to see what that looks like, because I have said for a while, I think Miles in midfield gives us things that we haven't seen. And I actually had a post on this on X in my sun-kissed state coming home. I really believe that the HLN grads, we need to talk about what they change for this team, because Miles is not alone. Miles, Ethan, and Max, the quality that these guys have in terms of being able to turn under pressure and use their physicality and burst past players in tight spaces in central pockets is factually something that this team hasn't had for 5 years. And I do believe that teams, they go through cycles themselves, and you really need to start adapting to the type of player you have. Like, for example, a pass for Ethan with 2 to 3 players behind him, or Max or Miles, is not the same as a pass to Kai Havertz. It's not the same as a pass to Bukayo Saka. It's not the same as a pass to Martinelli. And these guys' quality on the half turn will ask different solutions. Not problems, different solutions to problems. And we need to be braver in terms of understanding, no, they can do that. Let's play that pass. Let's do it. And I do think that the team will have to adapt to the players in a little bit of a sense, because in terms of central ability, really what we're looking at, Emile Smith-Rowe as probably the only player in that way that can physically use his acceleration on the half turn to create separation. And even then, it was more of a case of, with Emile, we saw it more in a second striker role. We saw it more in transition moments. These kids can receive in pockets with 2 to 3 people on them, hold people off, shrug them, turn and go. This is a fundamental part of their game where they want you to give them the ball in the fire. The bad coached pass, give it to me under pressure, they want it because they're game breakers, they're dribblers. And so I think we will have to adapt. And even for me, when I was coaching, I had to do the same thing. Like, I couldn't judge that type of player in the same way I had other players on the bench. Like, some of you are my coachables in terms of what I need to ask you. And then there's stuff that, like, mate, you've got the talent. You break my coaching board. You break it, and the best coaches in the world have talked about that. And I think Miles is in that category. He is a game breaker. He is somebody that a coach hates to go up against, but he goes, shit, that guy can ruin everything I just worked on the entirety of the week. And it's not necessarily through a goal or assist, but it's about breaking down a structure. And he can do it. And I don't want to limit that to one position. It can happen in midfield. It can happen at left back. I don't care where it can happen. I think we should be more rejoicing at the fact that we freaking have a player that can do that and is starting is our boy, not someone else's, that we made and is doing that on the biggest stages in the world. That there's a certain level of pride I've got in that.
Yeah, I think to highlight one thing you said, I think the game breaking aspect of this is huge. And if we're looking at a increasingly well organized, increasingly well structured, more and more 4-4-2 mid blocks and teams who basically are using Arsenal's tricks back against them, right? Like unable to get through those central areas. And we're looking at a team, and I find the central area conversation a little bit difficult because a lot of it is about the player profiles that you have, and I'm not going to kill, let's say, William Saliba for not playing central passes to who? Jorginho? Like, you know, like what are we doing here? Like, I'm not going to say that. And also, we get a lot of change out of the wide areas, so there's something there. But I think when you have a Miles in midfield, it will make a lot more sense to go through there, and it does break blocks, and it breaks lines of engagement, and breaks how teams need to defend against us, where they can defend against us. I think just to give my prediction, I think Miles will start again nominally at left back, but I think something you said towards the beginning is really the key point. Miles is like, for me, Miles' superpower, if we call it that, is breaking lines, as we just discussed. And the more effective that's going to be, or the places that's more effective is going to be further and higher up the pitch. I think he's going to play himself into midfield over the course of the season, is my prediction. What I would do, I think is probably similar to what I predict the club to do. I'm curious about whether you would do the same. But what I think is going to happen is really the question. I think Miles will start at left back, and over the course of the season, he's going to push further and further and further and further and further forward, because I think Arsenal are going to become, if we sign a more of a channel running number 9, I think teams did last season begin to sit a little bit further up because they knew we couldn't break them down. I think if we have Miles there, we're going to get that low block thing again. And if we have a proper number 9, we're going to get that low block thing a little bit more often. And then if we're breaking down these really, really compact spaces, I think Miles will become even more important. So yeah, that's what I think is going to happen. But I think basically, to get off the fence a little bit, I think we end next season with Miles is a midfielder for us. That's what I think happens.
I just think that was his natural journey. This is just completely natural as far as my perspective in terms of young players, where I don't feel that they always, the position they break through in is the position they end their career on. And for some people it is. But regardless, I find it's such a stupid thing to debate about, because fundamentally, if they're breaking games, they can break games from goalkeeper. Yep. I don't really care. They're breaking games. And that's the important thing. And so I do believe it's in midfield. I have my own suspicions. I've talked about them so much. And the quality that he shows in terms of composure in the final third, by the way, is something that, this team lacks in spades. And he's got it. And I do believe that a lot of the solutions that we've talked about against those physical mid blocks are things that he can bring. It's not just about breaking lines too, for me, mate. Like, he has been one of the braver passers first time into space that we've got.
Diagonals.
Yeah. And even that first time ball in the channel, like the pass that breaks down several lines of engagement, like the one willing to make that pass, he's been very brave in it. So I think factually that you want that bravery a little bit higher up. But also, I've said this a lot, Zubimendi changes a lot for me, mate. Like, he changes a ton. Like, when you have such a big influence in build-up, it doesn't mean that your build-up operators are going to be the same as last season. I think dynamics will change, and it will force different conversations, right? And I'm interested to see also the defensive impact about all of these changes, because if you push Miles higher into midfield, it asks different demands from your left back. And it asks different things if Zubimendi is going to be the one in the pivot that's going to stay a little bit deeper as well, right? Like, we know about some of the criticisms about him maintaining a small space game. Well, in order to keep it small space, we need to make sure that there's some athletes around you that give you that freedom to be small space. And, we just signed one of the best channel defending players in the world to a new contract in Gabriel, who is a monster in the channels. So boom, really helps that regard. Another thing that I think people may not be open to is, Mikel can change. We've traditionally always had 3 at the back in terms of a rest defense. Who is to say we don't move forward and do 2? And we push somebody forward, and that somebody forward that could be Miles. And who's to say that we can't adapt to those things? Like, I'm looking at, by the way, some other accounts. Let's take Liverpool, for example. Everybody, when they're looking at that team with Frimpong and Gyökeres and Florian Wirtz, I'm seeing a lot of people put 2 at the back, mate, in terms of what their wants from even a Liverpool perspective. I'm seeing a lot of Manchester City accounts, even just with their business, the projected Livermento, along with Ray and Ant Nuri. There's a lot of people with 2 at the back. And I've been saying this, I think that it's going to be a transition a little bit. There's going to be a give. If the opposition are going to camp out, we're going to have to add a player in there to create a superiority. And I do think that Miles could be a solution. Ethan could be a solution. It's just brilliant. I think they have been the biggest. They've saved us so much money, mate. I don't think people realize that we're able to do some of these delayed forward signings because to buy the players, you just saw it. Florian Wirtz is 126 million pounds. When Ethan, Miles, and Max are grown out, mate, that's the talent level that you're talking. People that solve central solutions that can turn and have good output, consistent output, are worth hundreds of millions of pounds.
Yeah, it's huge money, which is crazy, and hopefully long may it continue with the academy in that regard. Yeah, I maybe the only other person we haven't discussed here is Declan Rice, and how that impacts him. We've spoken a little bit more about him moving over to the right, certainly in possession. It's gonna be fascinating because we're talking, 4, 5, 6 doesn't go into 3. So either you change the 3, or you change the 5, or you change the 6. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how that all functions. As I say, as a prediction, I do think he starts next season nominally as a left back, but I think he's just going to play himself further and further forward, and that is going to impact how we set up and how we create as well. And where Odegaard is and where Zubimendi is and stuff. So we'll discuss that more. But he's coming, whether we like it or not. We're going to do a little bit of discussion about Alexandro, the link, and sort of central centre backs. We've done a bit of sort of tactical stuff there. I do want to come on to that at some point and sort of we talk about our defence and how brilliant it is, and it is brilliant. But I also want to talk more about if there's anything more we can get out of it, and especially in build up and how we can find different solutions and different ways of playing. Rohan wanted to do a discussion on what won't change next season, because we're obviously talking a lot about what will change and what won't change. I think could be a good chat, but we probably don't have time to do that enough justice. So let's move to questions, because we'll get to as many as we can. As always, if you want to get priority access to questions, you can do so by becoming a Discord member on Patreon, as we sort of discussed a little bit earlier, or as a YouTube member. YouTube members, you get access to that on the membership or community tab. Patreons, that should be in your welcome message. But yeah, loads of you in there now. It's popping off. I can barely keep up at this point. So yeah, it's good fun. But you get priority access to questions, as Felix Moser has today. Put a percentage on how likely you think it is we end up with one of Nico, Rodrigo, Leao, or Barcola. And George, I'm not going to allow you to get on the fence. You have to give me a number.
85%.
I'm going to go.
No, I'll just straight out go. I am incredibly confident within that list we get a major marquee at left wing.
I think the question is, for each one, what percentage would you give for Nico individually, Rodrigo individually, Leao individually?
Tougher question then.
Yeah, I think so. I'm gonna go. I'm optimistic about Rodrigo. Maybe I've thought my way into it. Maybe I am, to be clear, absolutely clear, I am willing it to happen. So there's definitely a bias there. I think it's like 65 Rodrigo. I put it even there. Then if we don't get Rodrigo, I'd say it's like 80-90% Nico. But in terms of who we've been chasing for years. But then if Barcola is available, Because that's the big question about Barcola. It becomes much more important to be Barcola. I'm on the fence here. Rodrigo 65, Nico, if Rodrigo isn't available, 80, but if not, then 50, 40, and then I think Leao and Barcola a little bit lower. But if Barcola is available, Leao's the only one who I look at and say he might be available. I don't think there's a big chance we get him. I think Barcola is availability dependent, and I think Nico's Rodrigo dependent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I don't know about the percentage, like attribution, but I'll probably put like a ranking of who I think is gonna be the likelihood, because I think Leao and Barcola are like the two unlikelies, and then it's obviously gonna be Rodrigo or Nico Williams in terms of our preferred targets. Again, this is not what I would do, by the way. This is just what I think the club are gonna be looking towards. But I just see Leao as more available than Barcola in terms of what we're seeing. So Barcola has to be the least likely, according to that feasibility argument. And then between the two of them, I really think that it's a lot closer than people think. I don't know if I look at Rodrigo as clear plan A, personally. I think that these are two players that you platform, you'll get major impact. My logic, I prefer Rodrigo because the floor is more advanced. And if I have been screaming for the last 8 months of win now, X factor, I cannot be hypocritical in this moment. And I that's how I define the two of them now. I think both of those are examples of talents that when you platform correctly and give the time, they can have explosions and world-class output. I just think Rodrigo has a better floor, and they achieve it in completely different ways. One is a very second strikery kind of winger. The other one is a more touchline isolation winger, and you can achieve success in both ways. And the last thing I'll say is Nico Williams is the one where he is the closest role complement that I've seen right now. Like, if you want, who is the most linked role symmetrical signing? Nico Williams, right?
Yeah.
But I think Rodrigo, for me, just because of the talent and what he could give you in the team, his floor is just factually better than Nico's right now. I think both can walk in and be platformed and do well. But yeah, that's just kind of where I stand. So I have the same list order as you, I think, is what I think will happen. I think it'll be Rodrigo, Nico, Leao, and then Barcola last. Again, this is not what I would do, because I think I would have that last clear ahead. If there was a 1% chance, I love Barcola that much, and that's the only thing I will say. For me, he is my dream winger type of target. So if there's a 1% chance, I'm putting my eggs in that basket. I think he could really change a club. That's how much I believe in him. But again, I've saved that commentary to last because I just don't think I see the feasibility to it.
Yeah, and there's other aspects, I think, even, which is why I say, like, what I think we'll do. Like, Nico, he's just been linked for so long. It feels like it fits in terms of a cultural thing and the age profile and the fact he's Spanish. And a lot of it makes sense. I think the way Arsenal are operating, certainly at the minute, in terms of long-term work on deals, which makes sense. We've done a lot of work on the Nico deal. It does make sense. I just can't see PSG letting go of Barcola, which is maybe why, because 3 weeks ago I would have said no chance ever we get Rodrigo, and that's why he's probably gone up in my estimation.
Things change.
So exactly, things change. If Barcola is available, we'll have a look, as Stephen Manaman once said. Is there a player, says Dimitko on Discord, in world football who is somewhat realistically obtainable, so not Yamal or Mbappe, for who you would actually be okay with spending a fee similar to what Liverpool spent on Wirtz? Jamal Musiala once said he was an Arsenal fan. If there is even a sniff of Jamal Musiala. It's hard though, isn't it? Because there isn't.
But that last part is like if it's feasible, and everyone's version of feasible is completely subjective.
Yeah. Yeah. Vinny Jr. I'd be okay with spending 100 million. But it's tough to answer. I suppose what I would say is, I think maybe this comes to a slightly different conversation for me, where oftentimes, and it often boils back to the same question, which is who's out there. Which I think is a question sometimes gets eye rolled, and it's sometimes with managers, and it's like, well, who's out there, and it sometimes can sort of evade difficult conversations that need to happen. But actually, with Arteta on the phone, actually with make that joke every time. With the market at the minute, I think it is a good question, and especially when we come to improving Arsenal, people say, oh, we want a top class number 9, or we want a top class attacking midfielder, or we want a top class left winger, or whatever it is you're trying to improve. There isn't a ton of talent out there right now that could improve Arsenal. I think this conversation doesn't always get discussed. There's like, in terms of just raising our ceiling, coming in, raising our ceiling straight away, I could name you 5 players, maybe, that I go, you come in immediately and you're available and you make us better. That is so hard. Do you know what I mean? Like that is like, if you just think about it from that perspective, from a club's perspective, you're being asked to do something and there's literally 5 people who could do the thing that you're being asked to do. It's a very hard job because we're so close. And I don't think that always gets talked about, in my opinion.
It's one of those things that it's such like a dichotomy of a point, because it is factually the hardest thing to do, but the distance isn't that big.
But you got to do it.
Right? Like I do relate this, and I've said this in a previous post kind of on X and stuff. Like when you climb a mountain, the last day is the lowest amount of elevation that you'll ever do. And it's the hardest trek that you will ever do. And but I mean, you are moving only like a couple hundred meters climbing up, when in reality, that is so difficult to get yourself to the point to summit, and not everybody does it. That's why it's such an achievement to do it. And I do think that Arsenal has probably historically struggled in that market. I actually think this is probably a point that doesn't get talked about enough. Arsenal as a team have failed in many marquee signings. Not in all of them, but in general, like throughout our history. I think Bergkamp is probably an example of one of the most famous marquee level forwards that came in and banged. You know, Henry came in for very, very cheap. Was pronounced as like a failed wonder kid. Patrick Vieira was doing well in France. He wasn't somebody that was a marquee at the top of their game that came in and did well. You know, we all know the Ozil in more modern times. You know, even throughout the barren period of 2006 to 2013, for example, we were buying relatively unknowns and making them into superstars. It wasn't a case of Arsenal buying a marquee that came in and banged. Like, and I am curious. I think, you know, Madrid have made a legacy out of that, the Galacticos. Yeah. But from an Arsenal perspective, have Arsenal really been a club that have ever bought marquees and banged with marquees?
No,
it's not been us.
This is something I spoke about in a recent Different Art video. Like, coming back to this question, like the very, very best talents in the world, the Mbappes, the Haalands, that tier. Arsenal are we're locked out of those conversations most of the time. So when the top talents are on the move and they feel like it feels doable. So let's say Rodrigo in this case, that's when I need Arsenal to be at the table, because I've sort of laid out a list of, like, let's say there's 5 ways top talents move. One is the Mbappe to PSG thing. You're just never going near that. Those sorts, Haaland to City. You're just not, Arsenal right now are not going to get there. But let's say Dembele goes to Barca and it doesn't quite work out. Where does he go next? We need to be in there. Let's say the next one, they're maybe aging. They come, was Joshua Kimmich serious about the end of his contract there? I know we're talking about wages, etc., but like that's when he's moving. And you go through, and there are other categories of transfer where the top talent is moving from club to club, where Arsenal could be at the table. And I think you're right. Historically, we just haven't. And so, but you come to a summer where I'm looking around and I'm going, okay, we're desperate for this, £100 million player to come in or whatever. Who? Like it really is a case of who. And so then if Rodrigo or Barcola is available, we have to be there. It's like, it's non-negotiable for me.
And to be fair, Declan Rice is our most recent marquee. Like 100%. And he's justified it. And it's been a bang. But again, the amount of like, I'm trying to think, mate, like genuinely, and not to put the trivia knowledge on the test here, but like, again, looking back at your most expensive signings in your club history, I mean, I would argue that Declan Rice and Bergkamp are probably the two most famous examples of a marquee being bought from our Arsenal Football Club and coming in and giving major impact. I think I struggle with a longer list. So
no, I think you're bang on. I think basically players who could go anywhere, players who could go literally anywhere, coming to Arsenal, who aren't, maybe slightly damaged goods for whatever reason. I think Ozil fell out with Florentino Perez, where I'm not commenting on them specifically, but just, they can't stay there, basically. They could go anywhere. They could stay at their current club. They could do whatever they want. We haven't historically done enough of that. And if we often talk about us wanting to be the Real Madrid of England, right? And like, until we start doing those deals where we can, we will be locked out of the conversation.
But by the way, I want us to do more of those deals. And like, I want us to be there more often than not. Like, this is part of the demand. Like when you say like, I want to be the Real Madrid of England, and I want to be those types of clubs. Those clubs do those things, and I want us to be at the table a lot more for those types of talents. And so like, when we're talking about, it annoys me that I have to be feasible. I'm not saying this always has to happen now, but like, it would be nice for Arsenal to do a Kvaratskhelia. This was a guy that was winning, Serie A championships. Okay, yes, maybe he was looking for a different challenge, but make no mistake about it, PSG walked in and took him from Napoli in a very happy environment, thriving, MVP of the team. He was really doing well. PSG came in and said, nope, I want that. And they took him. I would love Arsenal to do a little bit of that. And instead of us having to sit there and say, well, Barcola doesn't look like he's going to leave. I haven't seen a link that he's looking to leave. I don't give a crap. Barcola, you're not playing. I want you. Come and platform my team. I want Arsenal to be aggressive and being able to pull that move. And it doesn't have to be just Barcola. It can be anybody. I would like us, we're successful, flex it. And I feel that Arsenal haven't always historically done that. Even in our best pomps, even when we had the Invincibles, there wasn't very many examples of Arsenal doing. And there's a lot of context. The stadium, what Arsene Wenger had to understand and commit to from just a financial perspective is insane when you think about it, right? Like the risk that he took on for the banks and the mortgages to approve of those things meant he couldn't do the competing that he probably could do. But again, I think that Arsenal were robbed of an ability to act like a Madrid. Now we're in a position where we have never been financially healthier. We have had the best squad that we've seen in years, capable of competing. We're all demanding a trophy next year. Like we're at the stage in which next year is the year you need to win a trophy. And then, okay, so then like, let's get some of the spoils from that. Like you've reached a certain point, you've reached that success. Let's start acting like some of those successful clubs. Let's take the business class lounge. You've been able to buy the business ticket, go to the freaking lounge, get some of the amenities. And some of those amenities about being successful means I can start taking successful players who haven't told me they want to leave. It's not as clear. I can start making financial moves and bully my way into the conversation. And I'd love to see us do that more.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I actually think this is a bit of a blind spot for a lot of Arsenal fans because they will say two things within the course of a few sentences. They'll say Arsenal should be winning Premier League and Champions League, but we'd never get Rodrigo. We'd never get Barcola. It's like, well, pick your choice. Like, make your choice. Like, it's okay. Like, if you I saw this a lot with It's interesting, man. Like, you go on if you go on the video I made for Different Knock about Rodrigo, 30% of the comments are like, bro, this is never happening. I'm like, but you're the same guys who would comment that. So it's like, maybe you don't think it's going to happen, but it should be. This has to happen for Arsenal to get to where they want to go. You're the same person who would comment Arsenal needs to be winning Premier League and Champions League. Okay, but if PSG and Real Madrid and Man City and Liverpool are buying the best players in the world and it's a pretty basic point, and we're not, then you can't line those two things up. And I think eventually you have to look up. You have to look up at the Cronkies, and ultimately they've given us their plan. They've said, we want to be dominating. Okay, well, put your money where your mouth is, and let's see what we do this summer, because that kind of has to happen.
Pay up, baby.
Archton on X says, seeing as you're calling for confessions, I've started randomly saying stuff like lots to digest, preeminent driver, I'll maintain, platform our attack, randomly to myself out of context when I'm alone in my flat. Not a good look, having TCP brain rot.
I can't lie.
I think someone commented.
I love that. That's become a thing. I love that. You know what? Thank God that we've got the point that the podcast has got to a point where that is actually a thing. There's TCP catchphrases. I could not.
There's TCP brain rot.
This is the process, guys. This is the process. What stage is the Canon podcast in that we have developed TCP brain rot catchphrases? That's the stage.
Oh, God. And there was someone called Nigel Thornbury who says, hordes of people feverishly want to hear Rohan do his best George impression with the accent. Which
I love that.
I guarantee you if we asked him to do it, he would not do.
Would you do me? Would you do it equally?
Oh, 100%. I do you all the time.
Yeah.
Pause. Moving on. Right. This is one from Ivor, who says, thoughts on Antonio Nusa links. I've never seen him play, so I'm going to rely on your superior ball knowledge here, please, George.
I saw him. I looked into him when we were linked originally, and I didn't look into it seriously. I had only watched like a couple of games, so unfortunately I'm just not the right person to ask about the talent, the ceiling.
Make it up. Come on, do whatever else does. Elite ball striking. Elite turning radius, half spaces between the lines. Those are the things.
There you go. Yeah, unfortunately,
Who is he? He plays for who?
I forget now because he didn't get his big move, right? Was it Bruges or was it a Belgian team?
Well, I've just typed in Antonia Nusa, so that probably doesn't help, does it? Antonio Nusa, Norwegian, plays for Leipzig.
Oh, did he move for Leipzig?
Do we have a player for you guys?
Couldn't say.
I saw some links that Fabio Vieira was potentially going to be offered to RB Leipzig. Thoughts on that?
I could see it, and if you want to use it as a pawn for like a Sesko deal, like as a makeshift in terms of a buy with like an obligation to buy type thing, so that it gets pushed a little bit later. Look, I maintain the only way that I feel in this sense that it makes sense is if we start saying that Ethan's a lot more of a serious interior, Miles is going to come in, Max is going to come in for cameos as well. Like I don't mind moving with the talent, but I don't want to create another problem in the squad right now that we don't replace, and that final ball is something that we do lack right now. So removing another player, one of the few players that has got it, means that somebody else has to develop it or we have to buy it, simply.
Let's finish with this from Theo Wickstrom, who I believe is Swedish. He's got a Swedish... I'm Theo, only Theo knows what flag is in his bio. If that's not Swedish, I'm so sorry. I think it's Swedish. Do you think Arsenal would benefit more from letting Andrea Berta take charge of signings rather than continuing with Arteta's choices? Arteta's recent picks haven't worked out, but to be fair to him, maybe he's been restricted when it comes to attackers. Who knows? I want to use this as a platform. That is the Swedish flag. I'm very excited. I want to use this as a platform to discuss this, to kind of end the show. Not really, well, to come into the forward conversations, because look, people are going to think I'm making excuses for Arteta, and maybe I am. But I look at the forwards. I look at Bukayo Saka, who let's just isolate the forward group, and let's sort of talk about how much does Arteta have to blame, have to take some blame here. Bukayo Saka, he's developed. Bukayo Saka obviously has the talent, but he has developed him into one of the best forwards in the world. So I think I'm not going to take anything out on Arteta here, and he's got him to sign a contract, and looks like he's going to get him to sign another one. Gabriel Jesus, when he came in, was an immediate bang. And I think no one can argue that injuries haven't been the, as Rohan would say, preeminent driver to the issues with Gabriel Jesus. Gabriel Martinelli, similar, different story to Bukayo Saka, but similar-ish story. I think we have conversations about how he platforms him. Maybe the development has slowed down, and that partly is on Arteta. That's a different conversation. But I think in terms of the talent, he's taken that talent onward. Leandro Trossard was a pivot, ironically, one of the only pivots, I would say, in the sort of the Edu era, from Mykhailo Mudryk. I think the Mudryk thing, I really think it would have developed very, very differently under a different in a different environment than Chelsea, but that's a different conversation. But I think Trossard has been great. Kai Havertz obviously has been pushed forward. I think there was a conversation, or there was some reporting when he first came in. Sorry, no, there was an interview with Mikel where he said they thought he could play a number of different positions. I personally, I don't like this thing where basically Mikel has found a solution for an obviously very, very talented player, and it's used as like a stick to beat him with. I forget the guy's name, but this guy who's an Arsenal podcaster was like, signs Ben White, makes him a right back, signs Kai Havertz, makes him centre forward. I'm like, well, yeah, it's working. So why are we blaming the coach for finding solutions? Like, what are you on about? Raheem Sterling, not good enough, and obviously McAllister take his part in that. But I don't think that was a last minute deadline day 2 a.m. signing. That's not a sort of long term target. We know for a fact that Mikel has called for more forward signings. He didn't get Isak when I think we were in conversations with him. He didn't get Mudryk. He didn't get Rafinha. I would suspect he didn't get other signings that we're unaware of. It's supposedly Vlahovic. So in terms of Mikel hasn't assembled a particularly good forward group, I get it. And he has to, if we're going to praise him for signing a player, we have to talk about it when it doesn't work out. I find that quite a hard thing to stomach, and I look up personally, George. I don't know how you feel.
I find it incredibly ironic that I think 90% of Mikel Arteta's coaching success stories have actually come from forwards. You want to go about what he's attributed the forward development with and the players that he's actually changed coaching-wise, right? For me, Gabriel is like a big one. That's an example of a defender that I think came in incredibly raw, and we did a lot of a coaching journey there. People forget he was having Aubameyang receive off the back foot and do hold-up play, which is not something that he was. Eddie Nketiah went...
Lacazette's development, yep.
Yeah, Lacazette. Eddie Nketiah went miles ahead in terms of his development as far as what Mikel was able to do in terms of coaching. The work that he did with Leroy Sané and Raheem Sterling early on is well documented as him being the preeminent driver of a lot of their change in their successful seasons.
So platform their attack. Yeah,
yes, of course.
Lots to digest.
So ironically, I actually think that if you're looking at pure coaching success stories and like individuals,
that's quite a good point. Yeah.
It's like he's actually done the most with forwards than he's done with anything. He just hasn't bought forwards, and that's a complicated thing. I will refuse the logic that Mikel Arteta did not want forwards. Refuse it. I think you're being disingenuous to say that he did not want forwards.
I agree. I think the one place in here where I would look at Mikel, again, I'm always conscious of this thing. It's like if we win the league next season, we're going to attribute certain things to Mikel as successes that he probably doesn't deserve, and I'm okay with that. Because there's 11 players on the pitch who go out and score the goals, right? And there's guys above him who play the salaries and stuff. So we have to be fair. So I'm okay as long as, because we know that, I'm okay to maybe push a little bit too far here and possibly give him some things that aren't his responsibility. I wonder in the sort of in that period since he's come in, if you asked him, okay, there's been times where you haven't got the guy over the line. That's completely fair. Could you have done more to not end up with this group? I suspect so. I suspect so.
I think his priority of funds you could also question, no doubt. Like when he chose to go and align a certain amount of a budget to whatever. But I mean, that was his decision. It was his decision to get the club up to a certain point. I mean, if he did it in another way, it could have failed. It could have been successful. Who knows? What if my mother had wheels, she'd be a bike. Like there's all these like what if moments towards it. But fundamentally, categorically, the man has wanted signings. And anybody that's saying no, that he doesn't, is being unfair, is being disingenuous, and not truthful. He's been so upfront about it. Look, the degree to which he can push behind the scenes, that's like saying, well, behind the scenes, do you know anything? It's just an assumption at this point, and it's like a personal digestion point. I will say, though, like he factually, when you look back on it, his coaching success stories as like a coach, and some of his most famous sayings that have come out from just a pure coaching sphere, by the way, coaching attackers to receive on the back foot with Wales. The whole thing that was going around with the F2 freestylers that we see with Bukayo Saka in terms of an attacker that gets to an angle, either go across the body or high, because that's where you're likely going to turn into a goal. Like, the physical coaching confirmed stories that we've got from people in the sphere, ironically, have majorly come with forward impacts, which I find hilarious, to be honest with you, because the narrative is a completely opposite thing. So yeah, mate, I think that it was the dearth of the team. I have no doubt that Mikel is a conservative coach, just in general in philosophy. That you can't deny. But also it's like, you're going to change somebody for their fundamental philosophy system. Like, you can't. I do think that the critiques on fund allocation are completely fair. I haven't agreed with all of the decisions. Like, when we bought Kai Havertz, I'm not going to lie and say that I thought Kai Havertz ahead of that summer was the buy for £65 million. He's making those decisions to stand there and die by his sword, right? I don't agree with them, but that's what he did. Now, beyond that, though, this idea that he hasn't asked for signings and game-changing signings and X factor and be in the conversation and pushing the club to go the extra mile to buy Ollie Watkins and to go and do more in January with Vlahovic and do more with Rafinha and go the extra mile. Lies. That 100% he's done. However, has it always worked out? Has his definition of what the fund allocation always been right? No. I don't agree with that, and I'd question Mikel if I could. Like, in that moment, do you really think Kai Havertz was the right use of £65 million? I think he's done well right now, but for 300k a week, you can definitely have questions when we're asking the club to buy 2 superstar forwards. Fundamentally, his role will change. It's not guaranteed that Kai Havertz has the same impact, but you bought him for £65 million, 300k a week. That means that he's like a pillar. If in 2 years he's gone after you've done that, you're going to get questions. Now, injuries have done that to Jesus. There's some context there. I understand the questions, and I think it's not wrong to question Mikel, but also I think you need to be fair in terms of some of the outcome analysis there, because he has, ironically, coaching-wise, had a lot more success stories with forwards and forward applications than he has with the traditional defensive setup.
I think that's fair. And I look at who he's up against and the margin of attacking error he's been allowed to have. And I look at a Man City side who have signed what's his name, Ferran Torres. They signed Ferran Torres for €33 million. Doesn't work out, and they get rid of him. They signed Jack Grealish for €117 million. It's worked out to some degree, but not to the level that he'd necessarily expect. Julian Alvarez, did Pep necessarily get the most out of Julian Alvarez for 21 million? I know some of these are sort of more bargain buys as well. He's Jeremy Doku. I'm sure you could look back at sort of Pep's reign and players who haven't quite sort of worked out for him, and they're just allowed to move on. He just consistently buy until it works out. And I think there's a different level because the volume of signings hasn't been there. And as I say, I have to be fair. Mikel's an important voice in the room. As we all know, he's not the only person. He's not sat there on FIFA deciding exactly which transfers to buy. It's a conversation. He's an important voice in the room, though, and he has to take his part in the responsibility because he gets some of the praise. So how we've got here, yes, but I think the margin and those things. I suppose it comes back to this. I don't look at the forward group, and my first thought isn't Mikel. I think a lot of people that it is, and I think that's probably unfair a little bit, even if he does need to take a little bit of blame. We will finish there. Thank you all for supporting us as always and listening to the podcast. You can check out there will be a Scout episode this week at some point. There will be a Wednesday stream with James on the roundup, looking at all the rumours and stuff to keep you updated on the transfer window. We've got TCB live on Thursday. And if any big news drops, we'll also go live and discuss it as well. But just as always, thanks guys for being here. Really, really appreciate it. As we mentioned at the top of the show, if you want to get involved on Patreon or YouTube, etc., that's great because there's more stuff and hopefully more value there. But if not, then all good. And thank you so much for supporting us regardless. George, go put some After Sun on.
A little bit of elevate. You know what? I'm putting on nothing, baby. Beauty is pain. This will turn into tan. You know what? Deal with the leather skin, and then in 2 days, you're going to come out brand new like a phoenix.
I can imagine you in sort of 50 years, sort of like sat on a chair in Greece with a cigar, with sort of leather skin, talking to someone about like sort of how to break down a mid block or something, like Grandad George. I can see that happening.
Project Mbappe with George is going to be a serious conversation.
Project Bootsas. Yeah, it's coming. Thank you for being here. Thanks so much for supporting it and watching the Different Knock. Thank you, George.
Thank you, good sir.
Thanks for watching and listening, and thanks for keeping it Arsenal.
Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. This was one kind of queue the ladies thoroughly enjoyed.
Electrifying. Inspiration.